You're listening to the Hope Not Nope podcast
with Doc Dylan
and Brandy.
We empower high performers with a three-part strategy of hope,
self-agency, goals, and proven frameworks,
so that you can reach your potential
and the highest quality of life. How's it going? Dylan, I'm very excited for this episode of the Hope Not Nope podcast because I feel like it's something that you relate to a lot.
Nice.
Yeah, the question is, when I saw it come in, I was like, oh, Dylan's gonna be like, relatable.
So that means I have to do a good job of actually answering it instead of just relating to the question.
Yes, maybe providing the tools that you've utilized to
Yeah.
help yourself in this area.
Okay, I'm excited.
All right, so this listener named Jax asked us, my work includes a lot of decision making each day, and I love my work, but by the end of the day, I'm typically mentally drained and fatigued. How do I reduce decision fatigue and gain more mental clarity?
Woo, yes.
Relatable, right?
Relatable. Oh, I feel like Jackson and I could sit down and just share the battle wounds and decision making. But I think where I want to start is with a light reframe. Because what I've come to realize is that it's not the decision making itself that creates the fatigue. It's not knowing what the outcome is going to be and making that decision.
Okay.
Because if you're constantly making decisions, but those end up being the correct decisions that move you forward in your mission, it's very exciting to make those decisions.
Okay, I can get behind that.
If you're constantly making decisions and you're not quite sure yet of what the full thing is going to look like, that's where it gets really fatiguing because you're not getting the evidence yet that that was the correct decision. And then you have to make the next decisions before you've gotten the evidence back that the right decision was made in the previous one. So that's where I think the fatigue comes in and the taking away from the clarity of it. And part of this, I'll go back to working in sports and sports performance and sports physical therapy of you make a lot of decisions. And one of the most pressing decisions is, can this athlete return to play? And it's funny because at the higher levels, there's more pressure on that decision because of the money that's made, but there's more decision makers. The player always has a role in it, but there are very specific MDs, there's specific agents, managers, coaches that are all weighing in on this decision of what's the risk of this athlete playing, and are we willing to make that decision? But it's very much a team decision. When you get to the lower levels, let's say like a smaller high school or even let's say a semi-pro team, often that decision-making team is smaller just because of resources.
Sure.
So that decision-making becomes even more pressing on an individual to make versus being able to bounce it off as diverse as a team. And I started off working in those environments and realized that, hey, the current assessments and tests that I have aren't giving me the confidence that I'm making the right decisions and saying return to play. Because, for example, if we take someone that's coming back from a knee injury and we do a hop test battery, and it's a series of single leg hops that are happening on this, you get done with that test, maybe you hit about 20 to 30 single leg hops. That's nowhere compared to the amount of strain that a leg is going to take in a sport that involves running, cutting, and jumping, something like basketball. So that this test very much is necessary, but it underestimates the ability. So early on in my career, I was caught in making these decisions based off of the best tests that the research was giving, but then realizing this isn't enough evidence for me to be confident in this. So I'm making these decisions to say, you're good to go. Like, let's go get that clearance letter. Let's get you back in. But then going to the games and being on the sidelines with sweaty palms going, man, are they really ready to be back? And so then I realized that you got to get as much data as you can to be confident in that decision making. And when you do that, it becomes less fatiguing because you're more confident even if you don't see the immediate outcome. So what I would say in this section of that answer is the fatigue comes from not knowing what the whole outcome is going to be. But the way that you reduce that and give yourself clarity is by gathering the data that you can that makes you more confident in that. So in that basketball example, great, we have these tests that are in the research that say this or that. Okay, now let me take a step back and use some generalized perspective and just ask the question, hey, what do you actually need to do to play the game of basketball?
Hmm.
How many miles do you actually run during that game? How many times do you jump? How many times is there change of direction? What position do you play? Does your position have more cutting than other positions? Are you more down in the post and you need to have some more contacts because you're, always getting position and boxing out and like there's more contact. So, okay, now we got to start testing that to see if you're ready for that. And if I know from the sports science that in a typical game of basketball, you run 2.8 to 3.1 miles, and in our sports rehab, you've only ran 1.5 miles. Wait a minute, there's a flag there. You're not all the way ready to be back into play, or you're ready to be back into play for about half the time. So in doing that and looking at it and saying, you know what, let me do my due diligence and gather more data that is appropriate to help me in this decision making, the more confident I'm going to feel, the more clarity I'm going to have in that decision making. And now I share that example from the sports performance and sports rehab arena, but it spills over into any other arena.
Right.
If you're making a decision for your family, if you're making a decision for your business, if you're making a decision for your congregation, do you have enough data that allows you to make a decision that even though you don't know the outcome right away, that you're confident in that decision because there was enough variables that said this is the way to do that. And in that, some of those variables, because I talked a lot about the science end of it, but a lot of those variables are also faith and hope. The hope that if in your prayer life you were told to do this thing, that it's going to work out. It may just be a little bit different than the way that you envisioned it happening. But a lot of times I think we want that immediate result of I made the decision and tomorrow I wake up and it was the right decision to make and
Mm.
here's why, because now we've reached more people. Now there's more resources in the business. There's more opportunities for our family. Like we want those immediate things to know that, hey, that was the right thing. We nailed it. That was the right decision. Cool. Now I feel confident to make the next decision and the next decision. But oftentimes you don't get that right away. So it becomes somewhat overwhelming and fatiguing to constantly make decisions without knowing what that outcome is fully going to be.
Sure. Do you think that there's a time component to decision making? Like, I know you just used the example of, hey, having the hope that if you're prayerfully making these decisions, the outcome is going to happen. And it might not happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen. You use that example, but that's also like time oriented. So do you think that there's always a time component to these decision makings, like moments? Or, with Jax, he brought up his work specifically. Like, do you think that there's always time connected to it?
I
Or maybe the question is time one of those variables that they need to consider in order to be more confident when making the decision?
yeah, I think time plays a role, but more than time is circumstances.
Mhm.
And I think right now we're in like the heart of NFL free agency
Yeah.
and we're seeing the circumstances create the rapid decision making, right? So like we look at the Baltimore Ravens who have had a lot of wins, but not much to show for it in the sense of they don't have an AFC championship and they don't have a Super Bowl. They have a NFL quarterback MVP and one of the best running backs and just signed one of the best edge rushers. So they have all these great names, but they haven't accomplished the thing yet.
Hmm.
And they had a great name coach, but it wasn't working out. So because of the circumstances and the time that they have left of this window of opportunity to go achieve the ultimate goal for them, which is winning a Super Bowl, they were able to make these decisions confidently and quickly because of, yes, the time, but because of the circumstances. Where a team that's far away from that, let's say like the Raiders, like they're making some good decisions and they're spending, but they have more of a runway because their circumstances are they're not anywhere close to a Super Bowl championship. So they're looking at drafting a rookie quarterback and developing that rookie quarterback. So they're a bit away. So because of their circumstances, they don't have to be as rash with their decisions, given that they have a longer bandwidth to build up to it.
Hmm.
So I think the time component is how long do you have to wait before you see the fruit of that decision that was made?
Hmm.
But in the moment, a lot of times it's the circumstance and how close are you to that thing that this one decision is going to push you closer to it or potentially bring you back away from it. And I think that again, that's the fatiguing part
Hmm.
of I don't know if I made the right or wrong decision, but time will tell.
Yeah.
But then how much time, and that's going to be completely dependent on the circumstances, the situation that is surrounding that decision.
Hmm. Well, I think there's also the connection of, yes, making the decision with confidence, but then if you're someone who struggles with anxiety at time to time, like you really have to take a step back and trust in that confidence that
Yeah.
you're making the decision, but also take a step back of like, okay, the decision's made.
Hmm.
So now we just need to wait for whatever the outcome is, whatever the fruit is of that decision, because I can't be anxious in the waiting. I just need to trust. And maybe that's where faith comes in of like, I have faith that like this is going to work out regardless of the outcome, but hopefully I made the right decision for the best outcome.
100%. And I will say, early on, I think the decision making always comes in any type of leadership role. I think it becomes more pressing when you're either in a growth phase of getting closer to the mission, or you're in a situation in which the mission seems so far away and you're almost in the near desperation mode
Mm.
that every decision feels so heavy to make. And I'll be the first to tell you again, because I know everyone has heard this before, but you're not always going to make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I can confidently say that that is the case for me. And starting this business of early on and even to this day of decisions that I've made that were helpful and decisions I made that end up not being helpful. But in those decisions, I can look back at each one that wasn't helpful and I can tell you why I made that decision in that moment and the data that I was using to make it. So although made the decision in maybe 2 years, 3 years, it was different than what I thought it was going to be, I can tell you why I made that decision, which then gives me clarity and confidence to kind of continue on with that decision making role.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a stretch, but I think of families
Mhm.
and parents. And as a child, I think one of the more challenging things that you can do or go through, but also, like, in my opinion, the most important thing you can do is be able to look at your parents and realize that they made the best decisions
Mhm.
that they could have with the resources and the knowledge that they had.
Right.
The same thing goes when you're starting a business or when you're in some sort of corporate job or just job in general and you're the one making the decisions. Like, with the resources you have and the knowledge you have, how can you make the best decision available? And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that a few years down the road, a few months down the road, or whatever, things need to be adjusted. It just
Mhm.
means like you're doing the best you can
Yeah.
in that specific moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that looking back on that retrospectively is huge in realizing that any person in a leadership role is doing the best they can with the resources that they have available.
Hmm.
And I think commonly it's like, oh, if I was there, I would have done it this way or that way. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but are you doing it with the resources that they had available? And part of that resource is knowledge and the wisdom that's available. And partly that's on the person in that role to be getting more knowledge and equipped with more resources as much as they can. But we always need to bring in that factor of, oh, that decision was made and it didn't pan out the way that we thought it was going to. But hey, in the moment with what was available, that was still a good decision.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, being able to own that and explain, why that decision was made and how it came about with the necessary details that are needed, I think that builds so much trust in a team
Hmm.
because they're like, wow, you're being vulnerable and telling me that like, hey, you don't always have it together, you don't always get it right, but that you at least have a system in place and a reason as to why you chose that decision. And now you're sharing that with the team. And that's a great way to empower your team as well, because eventually you can't be the only one that's making decisions.
Yeah.
Like you have to have a team around you and people that you trust and people that you're empowering to put into these roles that are helping to make decisions, because that way you can start to delegate some of the decision making, which then helps you to see the path clearly with it, which then helps you be a better mentor or stable point for the leadership position that you're in, so that they're in the role, they're having trouble making the right decision, they're not seeing clearly, they come to you and you're like, hey, yeah, I can help you with this, but internally it's because you're able to have clarity because you're not always in the decision making meeting over and over and over again.
Hmm. Yeah, and for our listeners who are like, "Oh, yeah, that's me. I'm someone that needs to delegate more." Go listen to our previous episode because
Yeah.
literally last week's episode we talk about how sometimes it is hard to delegate,
Yep.
or there's a struggle in trust there, or maybe you just think that you can do a better job so you
Yeah.
don't delegate. But delegating is important for so many different reasons. But if you're someone that struggles with delegating, or needs help, or tips or advice in order to do that, both with task but also with decision making, go listen to our previous episode because I think it was really, really beneficial and had a lot of good meat in there for people who may struggle with delegating.
Yeah, a quick story pops up. It was from General Stanley McChrystal, I think is the last name.
Hmm.
But he was sharing that when he took office and was promoted into the general, that the first thing that he said was all the previous protocols will stay in place,
Hmm.
but he wanted to do it a little bit differently. But that was the first thing that he said. So it came to a big decision making meeting of, hey, are we going to go to war or not go to war? And he obviously has a huge say in that, and that is a very big decision to make. And he wanted to, but when he said, let's do that, the team basically said, well, we can't because there's all these protocols in place that we need to go through before we can actually do that. And he basically was like, well, what idiot put them in place? And they're like, sir, with all due respect, you did.
Yeah.
But it's a common example of so many times we're like, man, when I'm in that leadership role, I'm going to do it differently. But then you get there and you get all these other stressors and distractors
Hmm.
on it that you're like, hey, I want to do it differently, but the system hasn't been changed enough to
Yeah.
allow you to do it differently. So now your decision making has to go into changing the system to then allow you to make the decision making system that you want it to be
Right.
to help in the leadership. So there's always more to the story
Hmm.
than what people see. And part of it is because I think good leaders are transparent, but with wisdom, that the employees don't need to know every little detail of what goes on behind the scenes in a
Hmm.
business. They need to know the appropriate details that allows them to do their job extremely well, but they don't need to know all the inner workings of it. In fact, some people really don't want that.
Hmm.
They're like, I just need to know what the expectations are, what my role and responsibilities are, and I want to execute upon them extremely well. And when you give me all these unnecessary details, it gets it muddy for what the heck am I supposed to do with all that info?
Hmm.
Like it's taking me away from what I was supposed to be doing to help this company. And then as a leader, it makes you more confused as well of like, wait, why aren't you doing that project? Well, because we just had a 2 hour meeting about something that doesn't even involve the work that
Yeah.
I do. So it made me think I should be doing that and not do this. No, no, this is your role. Okay, then why was I talking? Why
Hmm.
were we talking about that? And it gets it really confusing. So part of that too is on the leader taking that ownership of, hey, not everybody needs to know exactly what's going on and making sure you have the right people in the right spots and the right people in the right meetings and really asking yourself, hey, does this person need to be here?
Hmm.
And I remember when I was teaching uh, more like full semester lengths, and the TAs were running basically like a Jeopardy review before an exam. And one of the students, like 3 minutes into it, packed up his bag and left.
Hmm.
And I remember all the students looking at me like, oh man, is he gonna get in trouble? Like,
Hmm.
are you gonna discipline him? He just left class early. And I was so happy
Hmm.
because the Jeopardy was a little disorganized. It wasn't, it was fruitful for some learners, but not for all learners. And the students was in there and said, this isn't useful for my time right now.
Hmm.
Like I can get more out of going to self-study than in this group dynamic where it's just super loud and
Hmm.
this and that going on. So he took the ownership to say, hey, this is a meeting that's not beneficial for me to be part of to do what I need to do
Yeah.
here. So I'm going to take it upon myself to gather my stuff and quietly head out the door.
Hmm.
To which afterwards, I talked with the student and I was like, hey, that was a great decision.
Yeah.
Like, awesome for you to do that. I'm not mad at you. I'm actually like applauding you
Hmm.
for taking the self-agency and like that. Like, good. That was good
Yeah,
for you.
maybe in high school don't do that, but like when you're in
Yeah.
grad school, like it's a little different than,
Right.
11th grade or whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing I want to add in on this too is in that reframe too of I think sometimes we get stuck in the what ifs. What if I make the wrong decision? What if I sink the company? What if I lead my family in the wrong direction? The what ifs tend to go to that negativity side of it. And there's a lot of doubt and a lot of fear in that side. And there's the other reframe of like, what if it was the right decision? Like, what if it does turn out to be better than what you envisioned? What if that decision is the thing that completely changes your life and your family's lives and your family's legacy?
Mhm.
And not to put pressure on it because that can sometimes be like, oh gosh, it's more overwhelming now. But just the positive thing of like, oh wow, this could really do some good.
Mhm.
So now I'm excited to make that decision because I'm not just thinking about the bad. So I think looking at the what if, and then the last thing I'll add in is to help with clarity, to make sure that you know what your personal values are and what your team values are. Again, whether that team is a sports team, whether it's a business, family, congregation, doesn't matter. You need to know the values because the values are the guardrail that'll keep you on that path to mental clarity. They help you in the decision making. Hey, this thing comes up. Wait, what's our value? Okay, that's our value. So, in order for us to be congruent to that value, we need to go and live that thing out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Jax, I'm with you.
Yeah.
The decision making can get very fatiguing, and did I make the right decision? Did I make the wrong decision? Oh, I don't know yet. But gather that data first
Mhm.
to allow you to be more confident that whether it turns out the way that you thought it would or not, that you at least have something to stand on as to why that decision was made. Look at your systems, reflect on the past of decisions that you have made that have turned out well, ones that you haven't, ones that didn't turn out great. Look at your systems, look at your values, make sure you have the right people that you can eventually delegate those decisions to, and then make sure you also are scheduling the time for the decision making
Yeah.
to happen because very quickly it can turn into where you're making decisions all day long,
Mhm.
every hour of your work week, and then you never actually get to work on the responsibilities that you have outside of decision making
Mhm.
because you're so freaking fatigued by the time you get done making all the decisions. So have scheduled times that are the decision making meetings.
Mhm.
And if you're making the decisions on your own, still schedule that in as to when are you the most fresh and when can you sit down and set an hour timer or however long you need. And in that meeting, just make the decisions, make the decision, move forward with it.
Yeah.
Come at it from all angles, sit down, make the decision, take a step in that direction.
Mhm.
Awesome. If you have a team, having team decision making meetings, not where the team is presenting all the evidence that they've gathered. They're in that position because you already trust them to do that. But having those meetings to say, what are you leaning towards? And I think an appropriate one is the data, but also what's your gut on this?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I trust that. Let's move forward with it. Like, we don't need to go through all the data that you collected. I trust that you got good data. I trust that you have a decision one way or another that you just need a kind of a vote of confidence
Mhm.
and the grace to move in that direction. And that's what those are. Cool. Hey, you're in this role because you can make good decisions. You are a leader of this team. I trust you in it. I know you're going to gather good stuff. What are you leaning towards? Awesome. I'm with you. Let's do this.
Yeah. I also just before we dive into our hope stories, I want to speak to the spouses and partners of
Hmm.
people who make a lot of decisions because I know at the beginning of opening Hope Not Nope as a business, there was a lot of decision making that you had to do as the founder and the owner of the company. At the time, I wasn't full time here yet. I was still working, but we had enough of like we were dating, but we had enough of a decision or a routine in our life that I knew that coming in hot every evening to ask you questions about just random things
Hmm.
wasn't going to be helpful. And we actually had to have a conversation of hey, can we make the decisions on Saturday or Sunday of what we're eating for the week?
Hmm.
Or, Brandy, can you just take that decision making? Like, I don't care. You know what I like enough. You know how many calories I need in a day enough that you can just make those decisions to help, especially in the newness of opening a business. And I just think too, the spouses and the partners out there, if you know that your significant other is making a lot of decisions throughout the day, that they're typically more mentally fatigued or decision fatigued, having a plan for food, having a plan for, I know some couples do like a monthly calendar meeting where at the last day of the month they look at the entire calendar together. They sit down for 30 minutes or an hour and they make those decisions then so that the entire month is already planned out. Like little things like that from not necessarily a work standpoint, but from a life standpoint can really help the partner. And then I just think it opens up to like now you can just have quality time together and quality conversations and really filling each other's cups versus like your relationship at the end of the day just
Yeah.
being more decisions.
Yeah. And I'll say to that too that we've had the conversation of, hey, at this stage in life and in the season that we're in, like I do not like going to game nights in the sense of like board games
Yeah, Dylan's not a board game guy.
because
It's no.
it's like, hey, I worked my decision making muscles the entire day and the entire week. The last thing I want to do is sit and look at this puzzle or this board game
Yeah.
and make more strategic decisions when like that was the entire day. So like I want to be in community, I want to hang out with people, but I much rather go and like have conversations and hang out and talk and connect that way versus a board game being on the table.
Right.
But if a board game's the only way, okay, cool, I'll like try to sacrifice, but I'm not in there like, oh man, this move matters so much.
Yeah,
Like,
playing Ticket to Ride is not like your
yeah,
like favorite thing to do every single month or every single week or every single day.
yes,
I like a good board game, but we don't play it that often
right.
because decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue. But I'll also say on the other side of being a spouse with a very supportive partner is that every decision, no matter how small, no matter how big it is, comes with some type of sacrifice. And having a spouse that supports that is very empowering and helpful to help with the clarity. Because it's like that's your best teammate.
Yeah.
And you're making decisions. I remember when I was making decisions earlier on of different job opportunities that I declined or didn't take that people in my circle were like, "What?
Yeah.
Like you're declining that?" Yeah, because this is the mission on my heart and I need to go after that. And it comes with a lot of sacrifices and having a spouse that has been incredibly supportive in the sense of like, yeah, I have your back, but also I want to come alongside you
Hmm.
and help you in that mission by working together, is like a step above and beyond, which is awesome. But even if you're not working together, just saying like, hey, I know that we made these sacrifices together. I know that there's times that it's challenging. I know there's times that you're super fatigued that we are not playing Ticket to Ride, but it's all for a bigger purpose and a grander vision and I have your back and I understand it when other people don't.
Yeah.
Because I just remember those conversations at like lunch and dinners and just people scratching their heads of like, what? You're
Yeah,
not going to do
especially
that? You're going to do this? Like, you're what? Like,
there's something to be said about like you're given an opportunity that you weren't looking for and you didn't ask for that you'd be good at that maybe financially makes sense or sets your family up for more stability.
hmm
But it's very clearly not what God has invited you to do.
yeah,
But you could get distracted by the glam of the stability
yeah,
and the shininess of the paycheck or whatever it may be. Not that those things are inherently bad, but if it's not what God is asking you personally to do, if it's not what God has put on your soul to do, then it's not going to be fulfilling. And I think when people don't live their life like that, it's hard for them to see someone reject or deny something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Where meanwhile, I'm over here, I get frustrated. I remember before I met Dylan, I would go on dates with these random dudes, like two. I didn't really date around. But like I would go on these dates with random dudes and they would talk about
I think you need to phrase it better, like random dude. Like
okay.
I'm just picturing you walking down the street, like you, me, date, let's go.
Well, I mean it was in like a group of people. I kind of knew the person, whatever.
Yeah.
But obviously didn't work out. I met my husband, who's the greatest thing ever. But I just remember having these conversations with these people, and there was two in particular that they were talking about this thing that would like give them life. Like they loved this thing so much. And I just remember saying, like, why aren't you doing that then? Like, why would you not be doing that? And their answer was, oh, because it wouldn't pay good enough and like I wouldn't be able to provide for like my future family and all these different things. And I just remember thinking like if God has placed something so brightly on your heart that it gives you that much life that you're talking about it and you're going into a field that is quite literally the exact opposite because of the paycheck, like that is not honoring what God has asked you to do.
Right.
And I just remember like that was like one of the biggest red flags to me
Hmm.
because I am the opposite that I'm like I'd rather risk everything because I feel like this mission has been placed on my heart than have like that stability that we're using as an example. So it just worked out that Dylan and I met each other because we're both like all in type of people. And yeah, those random dudes, not about it.
Not about it. Not about it. But Jax, just knowing that it can feel like you are in this bubble where you're making decisions completely by yourself, and that's a really terrible place to be. And although you might be a solo entrepreneur at this point, and you're not able to bring on a team or an employee, like there's got to be one friend
Hmm.
or someone that you can just share the mission with that they can help support you in the way of just being the Simbacam friend
Yeah.
that lifts you up, and when you start to doubt yourself that they can just give you that little reminder of why you started it,
Hmm.
and to keep persevering, and that if you don't want to do it anymore, that it's coming from a place of peace versus a place of fatigue
Yeah.
or a place of not having clarity. And that's a special friend. That's a person that like you keep in your life as long as you possibly can.
Hmm.
And I'll say in those beginning days, like I was making a lot of decisions that felt like they were on my own, but before I was with Brandy and had her incredible support, I also had a really great group of guy friends
Hmm.
that I could bounce ideas off of, and that they would just kind of give me the motivation of
Hmm.
like, oh, dude, that's awesome. And I'm like, oh, is it? Like, because everyone's telling me it's kind of like dumb.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, you think that? Like, yeah. And like, yes, you need to have unwavering belief in yourself, but it's so challenging to keep that all the time that it is beneficial to have those people in your court that are honest with you
Yeah.
and give you good feedback, but are also to just remind you, hey, you can do this. You are capable.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Love it.
yeah.
Can I dive into my hope
Hope
story?
story. Yes.
It's March.
Mhm.
I typically don't love the month of March, primarily because the weather is going to be doing what it's doing, where it like warms up and then it gets really cold and then it warms up and then gets really cold. Like I'm not a fan of the fluctuation of it all, but I gotta say the warm up in the past couple days has been so nice, and so I'm trying to change my relationship with March.
Yeah.
And
To put reference points to it, the past couple of days has been 70, and next week it'll be back in the 20s,
yeah, if not lower.
if not lower.
Yeah. So, yeah. And typically, like, you get sick because of the crazy, like,
Yeah.
weather fluctuations and then allergies and all the things. But, anyways, I'm striving to change my relationship with March. However, well, not however, but including, we are fortunate that because it's been high 60s and 70s, the snow has officially melted almost everywhere. There's still some that's still here. And I'm not a snow hater by any means, but I'm excited because the track at the local high school melted finally. And so we went to the track like 2 days in a row, and it was just it was awesome to
Hmm.
be able to get some sprints in and run a few laps and all that stuff. And at one point, I was finishing up I think it was the 2 mile when we ran the 2 miles. And I was finishing up, I was like on my last lap, and I look up and there was literally an eagle like 40 feet above my head, maybe flying. It was so cool. And if you've been listening over the past few months, you know that eagles have just been like popping up in our life. And it's been this constant, like, hey, I got your back from God type of like message in my heart every time we see an eagle. So it's just so nice to be running and then see an eagle and be like, oh, God's got my back. The spring is coming.
Yeah, and I, I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna add in a little hope story to
Yeah,
it because it honestly just popped up
sure.
in my brain of the eagle because I don't know if I've shared this one or not, but to that point, sometimes for Jack specifically and anyone else that has these questions with decision making fatigue and mental clarity, sometimes there's these little things, and I'm not saying always go out and look for a sign
Yeah.
because like that can be kind of dangerous, but
And
like
scripture literally says, like, don't be seeking a sign,
don't
like
be
Jesus is the sign. But
right. But sometimes you get these little things that are like just little reminders
yeah.
of what you've already learned because he's already shown you his faithfulness. So when we were down in Florida and we were hanging out at the hotel after the conference, we had another decision to make with the business, and we were trying to figure out what's the best path to take, and do we go this way or that way? And I won't share the details because I can't share the details. And we just talked about being transparent with wisdom, so got to practice it. But anyway, when we were getting ready to make the decision, uh, eagle flies right over our head,
Hmm.
and we're in like right in Tampa. That like I didn't know eagles were even in that
I
area.
didn't even know they were in Florida.
Right,
I'm still like, was that real? Like
right,
what?
right. Like we double take watch and we're like, oh, okay. And it was right when we were talking about the specific decision that this
Yeah.
happened, and it was a reminder to just, hey, just put a plug in it, be patient.
Hmm.
Like I got you. So sometimes that does happen. I just in the heart of the eagle.
Yeah. I love it.
That.
A lot of hope stories from Tampa over the past few weeks. What a great trip we had.
Right? Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for listening. And Jax, thank you for sending in that question. Hopefully, the decision making becomes less fatiguing and more exciting.
Mhm.
And we talked about all the ways that that can happen and that you can keep mental clarity. That is very, very hard. Values help with that. I was thinking of the road and pathway analogy of sometimes those guardrails actually help to protect the road and
Mhm.
keep it clear. So make sure you visit those. But great question. Could keep going on with it about it, but I can tell you that it does become less fatiguing, and then sometimes it becomes more fatiguing. It kind of waxes and wanes. But
Kind
when
of
you
ebbs
have,
and flows.
yeah, good systems, good people in place, it takes some of the load
Mhm.
off of you. Have a great week, and remember, high performance isn't just about using the strategy of hope; it's about becoming hope.
Thank you for listening to the Hope Not Nope podcast. Please subscribe and share this episode. This podcast is for educational and personal development purposes only and is not considered health or medical advice. For personalized support, connect with a Hope Coach at hopenotnope.org.